All right, welcome everyone to EdTechTeam Online. We are live today to talk about PBL for our teacher leader cohort. My name is Dominique Dines. I'm going to be just directing this chat today, and I'm super excited to have Tracy Purdy. She's also here on the call. She's going to be running our back channel. If you have any questions during this chat, please go ahead and just tweet them out using our hashtag EdTechTeamOnline. And our special guest today, an expert on PBL, is Jessica Loucks. So I'm going to let Jess go ahead and introduce herself and tell us a little bit about your background and what you do in schools.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here today. My name is Jess, and I work for Manchester Public Schools in Connecticut. I've been a teacher. This is my 11th year. So for 6 years, I was a language arts teacher at the middle school. And now what do I do? Oh, I work out of the library. So I'm technically like a library media specialist, but really my focus is tech integration. I'm fortunate to be an EdTech team consultant, and I love improv comedy and Saturday Night Live. That's pretty much who I am in a nutshell. I have done a lot of training about PBL through my district, but mostly like on the road, specifically with Naperville this past year. So I've worked with a lot of teachers on PBL and kind of helping them along their journey, because it's not like an overnight switch. It's something that kind of you have to work on a little at a time, and then you feel more comfortable with it in your classroom. So I have shared a resource. I think Tracy put it through the back channel. If you go to bit.ly/EdTechTeamOnline, PBL, no caps, you can see kind of like the infographic I'm working off of today. So the way I kind of looked at it, I just wanted to give a quick overview of how I view PBL, and if anybody has any questions, you can hit up Tracy. And then I was going to explain in my district how we kind of view PBL. So PBL is kind of baked into our curriculum, but also there's some time for exploratory PBL. So figured I could help you out with that, and then we'll finish up with some resources. So is that okay for now? Is that good to go? All right.
That sounds awesome.
To get started, for those of you who might not know more about PBL or whatever, but it's different than just a regular project like, hey, we just studied the Renaissance, now do something. It's more of an ongoing project. And if you look at that infographic, I'm going to just pull it up on the side so I can take a peek. The whole point of PBL is that you start with a driving question. Now, people are always like, what the heck is a driving question? Well, I have standards for that. I've got curriculum I have to hit. Well, it's our job as a teacher to kind of look at our standards and go, all right, how do I change this? How do I make it seem a little bit more challenging? Because it's going to, once you take your standard and change it into a driving question, it's going to guide your project work, and it's going to create a sense of challenge for your students. So when you're looking at your driving question, you're going to be like, okay, what do I want my students to know? So maybe your standard is, I want them to know about World War I. I want them to know why it lasted so long as it did. But instead of just giving them that standard about like, we need to know about World War I, the driving question could be something like, pick a time during World War I that was pivotal, and then describe how you would do it differently. So they have to do research on it. They have to put their own spin on it. It gives them voice and choice, and it gives them like a sense of something, a challenge. For teachers, a driving question really like frames their unit and frames a project. So it really communicates that standard in a sneaky way, but it also like initiates and gives focus to the students. So your driving question really is important to do. You want to give your students a really good driving question. That's the fun of being a teacher, right? Changing like how things look so it's more entertaining. Once you have your driving question, you might want to look at it through the lens of like, is it authentic? And is it, engaging? So for example, if you're giving a driving question and the answer is totally Googleable, like you can look it up on Google, yeah, that's probably not the best driving question, because a driving question is open-ended and it pushes them towards some kind of solution. It doesn't sound like a test question, and it really requires some investigation. So when you're thinking about a driving question and you're flipping your standard and making it sound more entertaining, like make sure it's not something that's just like a quick find, because that's not really the point of PBL. Other things besides being engaging is that you want to think about what the learning outcome is going to be. And this is where you can give your kids some flexibility. So whereas the driving question is a structure, the learning outcome is where things can get like a little bit fun for the kids. So It could be a persuasive presentation. It could be a website that they create. It could be some kind of event that happens in school or outside of school. And the challenge for teachers that I find that they kind of have the most when it comes to deciding on a learning outcome is the balance between a purpose and also like the purpose of the assignment, like getting them the job done and not just being a foofy thing, but the purpose and then balancing it, your outcome with engagement. So how do you get your kids to really understand this driving question and the coming to a solution, but also letting them have fun with it? So when you're looking at that purpose, you know, is there mastery? Is there rigor? And when it comes to engagement, are we providing our kids with like checkpoints along the way and models, giving them an opportunity like to make their site look a different way? Or maybe there's a kid in your class that you do want them to present their site, but this kid really likes to act things out and make a video. So when it comes to PBL, it looks different for all different age levels. Another thing that always becomes a challenge as I've talked with different teachers is like, how do you get kids to stay on track? You know, you might throw a project out to a group of kids and then they'll be done in like a day and you're like, wait, how did that happen? Or they'll be done, it will be like, yo, miss, we're not done yet. So, and it's been like a month. So how do you propel your students through the project so they're not straying off the path and they're staying focused? So if the project is extensive, what teachers have to do is I find it really great to chunk your projects into smaller bites. Okay, so by this date, I need to see you here. And by this date, we're gonna conference and do this. Conferencing is probably one of my favorite things to do to propel during a project-based learning kind of activity, because it requires the students to be like, you're kind of scaffolding the student to eventually get to an inquiry kind of a place where they're doing it on their own, but they don't know how to do that right away. So when you set up time for conferencing, the kids can't run away. They know you're expecting something of them. And if it's one-on-one and they don't have their work ready, you can be like, well, what's the deal? How can I support you more? And are we gonna have to pivot or iterate or whatever the case may be? So I'm a big fan of meeting and having peers spot check each other too. That is a great way to give kind of agency to your class and being like, okay, you're sharing with your groups today. You knew about this was coming on last Thursday. So I'm a big fan of that. So longer projects have checkpoints, shorter projects, you know, get exit slips or, you know, have a goal setting session at the beginning of the class and then work your way out. And the thing that is the best about a project-based learning thing like people dabble in and out. When it comes to project-based, I really feel like you need to have some kind of product. And again, like I said, it's going to be different per, you know, age group or level or content area, but you know, is it an authentic learning experience? Are your kids taking to social media if they're at the high school ages? Is there a product to display out at the end of this? Is it changing the community? That's the whole point. We want global citizens by the end of this. We want kids that are active, that can see that their project has been worthwhile. And it's not just been a time filler, because that, as a kid that was a loquacious child that did not like busy work, this is how my teachers could hook me. So overall, this is kind of how I see PBL. This is kind of like models that I've seen from my buddies like Jeff Heil, Jesse Lubinsky, my buddy David Lee that lives over in South Korea. And this is kind of my take on it. So what I decided to help you with today, and we can kind of just bop through this. If you want to scroll over to the top of the infographic here, I've got a whole bunch of resources here, and they're kind of sectioned up in a way that should make a little bit of sense. But one of my favorite parts about this kind of PBL stuff is what I mentioned before, the mindset shifting. For teachers that like really good control over their class, PBL can kind of feel like nerve-wracking. They have content they have to get through. They have a test at the end of this. For teachers, there is a lot of front loading that comes with PBL, like rubric making and checkpoints and scheduling and getting all the information, or maybe you have resources that you want the kids to investigate and you're modeling how to find a good resources. So for a teacher, it takes a lot of front loading, but then the kids are really struggling with the information and making it their own. And that's where the messiness happens, but that's where true learning happens. So in the section of the resources where it says mindset shifting, something really big in my district is that we kind of have this, we look through our work kind of through like a habits of mind lens. So can you look through your work with humor? Can you display resiliency? So maybe if you kind of think of true learning and having these habits of mind, I put a lot of times teachers need help when they are doing a project-based learning. Sometimes they want their kids to work individually, and sometimes they want them to work cooperatively. But PBL collaboratively is not group work. So I put in there this resource on the Kagan, which is like a classic, because I felt like that really helped me when I was doing PBLs that were collaborative and long-term. For example, it's not just like get together with your group and talk about what you did. All right, I'm giving you 2 minutes to talk about this, and each group is going to share out 3 things that their group members came up with. 2 minutes to starting now. So your Kagan cooperative learning skills, those can help you structure your PBL lesson days, like when you want kids to get done things really quickly. Another thing that my STEM teachers are really looking at is this lens of computational thinking. It's a whole curriculum I put in there for educators if you're a STEM teacher. And then I threw in a couple hashtags along the way. Another thing, if you're looking for curriculum, if you're like a STEM teacher, one of my buddies, Jesse Lubinsky, his district does Project Lead the Way. It's curriculum, digital, all set, ready to go for you. I put a bunch of books in there from Kevin Brookhauser, the 20% Time Project, which literally will help you walk through the steps of how do you let go, but also give your kids structure. I put some videos in there. One of my favorite things from Jesse, I'll speak to him again, but his district is doing where you can have kids write creativity grants and grants for things that they want to see that benefit their community and their school community. I thought that was really helpful. And then just a bunch of digital resources here from like Nick Provenzano and other things that I thought would be helpful for you all. Any other questions before I start propelling into the difference between like curriculum in my district versus exploratory? How are we doing here?
We're doing great. It's so fun to hear all of this, and your excitement on PBL comes through so much in it. So such great ideas, and this resource page is just awesome. So
sorry, it's a little overwhelming.
No, it's not. It's so many great resources in one place. So if you guys are watching live right now, go ahead and tweet out your questions. If you have questions later, you can still tweet them out and make sure that, and we'll get back to you, or Jess will get back to you. Jenny Derby, she's saying, I adore you, Jess. So glad you're making an appearance in my day.
Hey Derby, miss you.
PBL made tangible. So any other questions, we'll make sure that we forward them on to you. But just such great ideas and just a really clear way to look at PBL. It really will hopefully energize people as they're going through all the resources.
Okay, so very quickly, just to give you an idea about Manchester, Connecticut, we're an urban district. We have like 9 elementary schools, 2 middle, 1 high. We dabble in PBL. We're not experts by any chance, but we do move towards that. We're beating to that drum and getting there. So what I've been doing in a way for me to understand PBL, I really had to look at like how my teachers and how I myself were using PBL. And just so you know, I asked teachers at the elementary school level, I asked VPs at the high school, I talked to coaches. I really wanted to give you guys a snapshot of how it could look. So there is PBL that's baked right into our curriculum. So what I did is talking to one of my good friends, Laura Becker, who's a coach, STEM coach. She informed me that we have like STEM classes for K through 6th grade, where 3 days a week, they look through the lens of the new, the NGSS, the new something science, forgive me, I'm not a science teacher, but they're like these new standards for science. And they have these inquiry-based starter problems with the kids. They've done things with ice balloons where they have to like ask questions about what happens when you make you have a balloon, you cover it with ice, and then you put salt on it. And like what happens with the salt? And the kids aren't told anything. They just kind of have to ask questions. So it really, those students are actually struggling through things and working through these longer time projects. At the 7th and 8th grade level, we're very lucky to have these STEM classes that are very driven on PBL. these world problems. Kids are solving things. One of my favorite things that one of my enrichment teachers have done, Kim Gola and Catherine Parker back in the day, they set up like a Shark Tank where they have these like 20-time projects. The kids have to write a proposal, and then they had to pitch it to the teacher and an administrator to kind of come, you know, say what they wanted to do, how it was going to impact the community. That was probably one of our favorite things. And that has sort of slowly started to leak into, from enrichment into other core classes. So now teachers, and a smaller scale, maybe they're not doing the whole Shark Tank thing, but they are going to the teachers, pitching their proposals, saying this is what we want to do, either individually or collaboratively with their groups, and moving forward that way. One of the things that my district has done at the high school level, though, which I think is very, very cool, and you can see this on my infographic, is at the high school, within the last couple of years, we have piloted and then followed through with what we call academies. So by 10th grade, students, if they have an idea of maybe what they want to be when they grow up, they will pick an academy. For example, we have a medical careers academy. We have a STEM academy. There's EPSA, they call it EPSA, Education and Public Service, so people looking to become in law enforcement. We have one on performing arts and communication, so PAC, and then global studies for students that might not know what they want to do. So when we have these academies in 10th grade, it's totally like they're given these exploratory kind of experiences. It's equal to what I like to think about with Tony Wagner in the book, Creating Innovators, kind of providing this buffet of learning experiences. So if I'm a student in 10th grade and I know I might want to be in the medical field, they have speakers come in and speak to them. They have, all these like field trips, and they study all different types of medical careers that they could have. So they're given this kind of baseline to scaffold them to figure out what they want to do. Eventually, what we're working on this year is we're developing capstone projects. So if I'm a medical career student, I got all this all these like experiences at the 10th grade level, 11th grade level. By the time I'm a senior, I can choose a capstone project and something I want to study deeper about the medical field. And then that really applies to me. That's giving me voice and choice. And I'm really driven by it because I'm creating my own driving question. Eventually, that's where we want our students to get to. So if we are modeling for them what a good driving question is and how to write a good question, how to investigate it, by the time that they are older, or the time it doesn't even have to be by their senior year, it could be by the time they're in middle school if this is something that they've been doing all through their elementary school. But this is what we're working towards in my district. So PBL in the curriculum is definitely like, we're working on it, we're getting it there. As for exploratory PBL, this is like where I have a lot of fun because I don't have my own classroom of students, so I'm lucky I get to pop into other people's libraries for other things. I get to run my own makerspace. And I'm really excited about it. So let me give you an example of some of the exploratory PBL that we've done. So at the elementary school level, there's a couple different things that have been happening. So there's clusters, which teachers have done all over an elementary school building. They will ask kids what they're interested in. Maybe it's sports, maybe it's planting and gardening. And they look at the survey results from the students, and then the teachers will take a cluster of about 15 kids, and the kids will get exposed to that. So again, you're providing this kind of baseline interest level. And this is something that just happened last year. We've our librarians, our media specialists at the elementary school level have started Genius Hour. So kids are allowed to work independently or collaboratively on a topic that interests them. And I put some resources in sample 20% time projects if you want to take a look up there. But one of the things that they noticed was that we want kids to have a little bit more flexibility, but also a little bit more structure. So they are doing this thing called Flexible Fridays now this year. They've taken their 20% time and moved a little bit forward. And actually tomorrow, I can't remember the name of it, they're running some kind of creativity fair where they have teachers and tables, and I believe a couple students running these tables. How about that? Where the kids kind of have this fair and they're exposed to stuff, and then they're going to be able to figure out what they want to study on Flexible Fridays. And then there will be a presentation or ways for kids to have authentic audiences by the end. I'm very lucky at the middle school level to kind of be in charge of my makerspace. And it wasn't until last year that I had the awesome opportunity. This girl just stumbled into my makerspace. Her name was Jasmine, and she was just like, hey, you know, I think I like robots. I'm like, okay, well, we have these things called Little Bits. Why don't you like play around with them, see what she's saying? She's like, you know, I really love this girl on YouTube that makes her own crazy robots. I'm like, well, why don't you have a YouTube channel? And so she kind of got more comfortable. She started recruiting people. And now she started what my middle school, Illing Middle School, a Gearheads group. That kind of just runs on its own. They meet today after school. I just have to be there in the background, but they work on coding, they work on video stuff, they work on a little bit of everything. Sometimes I just have to make sure everything's going well. But they have their own website. I'll put the link in there after this hangout. And you can follow Jasmine on Twitter. They're always looking for crazy invention ideas. So they just love keeping up with that stuff. At the high school level, I ended up talking to one of our assistant principals yesterday, and I had heard about this, but I had no idea we were the first high school in the country to do something like this. But we're not the first people to have student advisory clubs. So I mentioned the medical academy. I mentioned that we have academies. Apparently, students at the high school have made their own advisory clubs where they kind of run things if they're really interested in, like the medical careers academy. So one of the things that we just did this past year, if you click on the link, there was a heart chase, which was these students were very passionate about making heart awareness. So they started this heart chase thing, which was like this, it was a big, all these schools showed up and kids were running to different, like, what was it called, stations, and they had to complete different heart healthy tasks and learn CPR, and then they would run over and do jumping jacks, and all the students planned that. So there's a really authentic learning experience. We also have health fairs that the kids put on through the Medical Careers Academy. I didn't realize this, but one of our public service classes up at the high school, a set of students, they were responsible for getting the defibrillators through the town of Manchester. So again, a really authentic learning experience for these students, feeling like what they're doing is actually making a difference in the community. So that's just like a dabble of what's kind of happening here in Manchester. But again, PBL can look different, and it's okay, and be okay with it.
Jess, this is so amazing. Just all the different resources and ideas that you've shared with us. I'm going to leave my screen up just for a minute there with the link if people want to get to this awesome Google drawing you created on project-based learning. But thank you so much. I had a few questions that I thought of. I don't know, Tracy can jump on in a minute and see if there's any from our feed. Remember, if you do have any questions for Jess and you're with us live right now, or if you're watching this later, please just tweet them out with EdTechTeam Online, and we'll be sure to be following the feed and getting back to you with your questions. And you kind of just answered this question with the heart chase that you talked about, but you mentioned when you were going through just the different stages here of project-based learning of that public product. And so I was wondering, like, what kind of products have you seen? I mean, you mentioned a few as you were talking, but
I mean, at the end of the day, it can come down to big or small. Like, it could be a science fair that the kids put on. It could be a fundraiser. It could be an event that takes place that requires tons of kids coming in. But at the end of the day, it's also kind of listening to your students, maybe giving them that choice to be like, how do you want to produce it or share it with the public? Or maybe as a teacher, you can decide like, okay, we're all going to just make websites. Or maybe there's a kid that is like, I'm going to take it one step further and take it to my social media account. So as a teacher, it requires flexibility. Obviously, as tech responsible adults, we have to make sure our children are safe and that parents are in the loop. But again, anything from events to having kids bringing speakers in themselves or going out and educating the public. I mean, our communication. So we have a very active news studio up at the high school. They run their own student-directed news studio, and they go out and it's called The Pulse, and they interview town community stuff. They find out what's happening, and they run a news program at the high school, and it's been outstanding. We've had a lot of kids successfully leave there and find jobs in communication, ESPN, ABC. It's very exciting. Yeah, and one of the other things that we know is we have this company called, our organization in Manchester called MAC, which is our food shelters and food providers, food shelters, stuff like that. And we have students that run projects all the time that help fund that or donate food to that. So it has to be something meaningful for the kids, while all circling back. It's like the teacher's a conductor, and like the kids are all playing different instruments, and ultimately they all have to play the same song, but they're gonna do it different ways. So hopefully that kind of makes a little bit of sense.
Yeah, I love that metaphor. And I love too that everything you're mentioning really does go back to just making an impact in communities. And you talked about, creating global citizens, which we just went through a unit on global collaboration and community and just the importance of being connected. And this just goes hand in hand with that, getting our students ready.
A lot of times too, I feel like teachers think that they have to come up with these ideas on their own. Like, rely on your extended PLN, please. Like, you don't have to recreate the wheel, and you don't have to come up with it all on your own. The people in our buildings are busy, but there are people out there on Twitter, on Google Plus, sharing what they're doing. And that sometimes is all a person needs to feel like, wow, this is happening somewhere else. I can do this. And then they move on. So,
yeah, totally.
I just want to jump in real quick. I know that there are always a couple of questions about that piece where you said that, you're keeping track. Your students are all doing different things, as you said, all playing different instruments at the same time. Yeah. They're all on a different project. One kid's creating a website, one kid's creating a flyer, one kid, they're all doing different things. And I think what you said is giving everybody the permission to know that it's okay that they're all doing different things at the same time, that everybody in your class doesn't have to do the same thing at the same time. And those little mini conferences and check-ins and peer check-ins will be really helpful in keeping kids on track.
And even if you are giving your kids voice and choice, that doesn't give them a pass to do anything they want, because you as a teacher are setting the tone and the pace. So by this day, I need this done. Like, don't be afraid to be bossy.
Yeah, and it's just really clear when they do have that authentic driving question that the project will be much easier for them, the whole process going through.
Because it's something that they can relate with, and it's understandable. It's not a standard, where sometimes adults have problems reading standards and curriculum. So I know I was. So there we go.
So we really appreciate your feedback on that, just giving people a little bit of freedom to understand
and that. If anybody needs any clarification, they can hit me up on Twitter. I usually can get back very quickly. So I'm part of your PLN now, whether you like it or not.
It's good to have you in the PLN.
Okay.
They'll be happy.
Thank you so much for having me here today. I appreciate it so much.
Yeah, no, thank you, Jess. And we'll be sure to tweet out the resources one more time, just so everyone can find the resources that Jess gathered for us and put together. So thank you so much for being a part of our teaching.
I'm so happy. It was great. Take care, guys.